Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more notable names in Jewish American history. Before we jump into this video, I do want to go ahead and remind you I got two ways to donate to the channel. I have a Patreon account, which is a month-to-month donation system. I also have a coffee account, which can do much the same and do single one-time lower amount payments as well. Both those will be in the description box below the video as always. Do not donate if you are in financial trouble or donating will put you in financial trouble. Take care of what you need to take care of. It's tough enough as is with these morons in power. If you can afford to donate and you want to donate, thank you. I do appreciate it. It is me, myself, and I that make the video, so yeah. Now, with all that said, let's hop into this video. And as you can see, we're talking today about Jonas Salk, creator of the polio vaccine. No, he did not put microchips into his formula. He did not seek to genetically change people. It was an attempt to create a form of immunity against polio, which he succeeded quite well, which is why it hadn't been a big event in a long time. You can thank him for that, but now that stupid morons like RFK Jr. and his lunatic butt kissers who are against science and vaccines have destroyed much of our science and medical branches. Yeah, we are so screwed as a country. Just so many different directions because the stupid got in office, because the stupid voted the stupid in power. Anyway, the 1950s are often considered to be a safe and quiet decade when American families moved to the suburbs, drove large modern automobiles, and enjoyed a stable and prosperous economy. But beneath this tranquil scene, parents faced a great fear: the dreaded poliomyelitis, or polio as it is commonly known. The disease had killed over 1,300 Americans, a large percentage children, and crippled more than 18,000 in the year 1954 alone. Yeah, well-known President Franklin D. Roosevelt had polio when he was younger, and thus he hobbled on a cane when he walked at all. On April the 12th, 1955, Americans received the much welcome news that Dr. Jonas Salk had developed a vaccine against the frightening disease. Immediately, the federal government implemented a plan to have the vaccine produced by 6 licensed pharmaceutical companies and distributed to children throughout the country. Within 1 year, the deaths attributed to polio declined by 50%. And this downward trend continues to the present, when polio has been totally eradicated in most of the world. So yeah, cut it in half in 1 year and it just continued to drop. But now that stupid has screwed over America, yeah, I think we've already been seeing outbreaks of stuff like this. And people don't understand how freaking bad it was. Because, oh, you never had to grow up with seeing what polio did, knowing what polio could do. Nope, you're just stupid. But this was from the EisenhowerLibrary.gov. From the National Institutes of Health's National Library of Medicine, Jonas Salk's pioneering the fight against polio and beyond. Jonas Salk, born October 28, 1914 to June the 23rd, 1995, was an American medical researcher celebrated for his pioneering work in virology, particularly in the development of the first successful polio vaccine. This review highlights Salk's multifaceted talent and contributions. His research on the polio virus led to the creation of the inactivated polio vaccine, proving that it could prevent the disease. In 1955, the discovery of the polio vaccine was a pivotal moment in the fight against poliomyelitis. Salk's contributions are celebrated in the record of medical history, highlighting his impact on modern medicine and public health. As a professor of bacteriology, preventative medicine, and experimental medicine, Salk's scientific journey from his innovative methods to the creation and widespread use of the inactivated polio vaccine helped eradicate polio from various parts of the world. His contributions beyond polio, such as his work on the influenza vaccine and the founding of the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, are also well known. By exploring Salk's legacy, this review examines how his work and dedication continue to influence modern medicine, public health, and science, impacting humanity. But yeah. Jonas Salk image. Similar articles. Okay. Now let's hop over to Britannica. Born October 28th, 1914 in New York City, New York, and died June 23rd, 1995 in La Jolla, California. He was an American physician and medical researcher who developed the first safe and effective vaccine for polio. Received a medical degree in 1939 from New York University College of Medicine, where he worked with Thomas Francis Jr., who was conducting killed virus immunology studies. Salk joined Francis in 1942 at the University of Michigan School of Public Health and became part of a group that was working to develop an immunization against influenza. In 1947, well, before we read that, remember, influenza up to this point was a horrid disease. You think, oh, somebody's got the flu, but back then, it was bad. 1918 influenza outbreak. Worldwide, killing millions. We still haven't eradicated the flu because it changes so often, but we are trying to keep it at least at bay. So it isn't horrid as it has been in the past. In 1947, he became associate professor of bacteriology and head of virus research laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. At Pittsburgh, he began research on polio, an acute viral infectious disease of the nervous system that usually begins with general symptoms such as fever and headache and is sometimes followed by more serious and permanent paralysis of muscles in one or more limbs, the throat, or the chest. It's why often a lot of victims of polio ended up in iron lungs so that they could be helped to breathe by the machine because there was nothing else we could do for them. Technology hadn't really reached beyond that point. I don't know if we could even really do much for them now. Maybe with some of the technologies we've accomplished. Hell, we probably don't because stupid ass fucked everything up. But anyway, in the mid 20th century, hundreds of thousands of children were struck by disease every year. By the disease, polio, every year, working with scientists from other universities in a program to classify the various strains of poliovirus. Salk corroborated other studies in identifying 3 separate strains. He then demonstrated that killed virus of each of the 3, although incapable of producing the disease, could induce antibody formation in monkeys. In 1952, he conducted field tests of his killed virus vaccine, first on children who had recovered from polio, and then on subjects who had not had the disease. Both tests were successful in that the children's antibody levels rose significantly, and no subjects contracted polio from the vaccine. His findings were published the following year. In 1954, Francis conducted a mass field trial, and the vaccine injected by needle was found to safely reduce the incidence of polio. On the 12th of April 1955, the vaccine was released for use in the United States, and in the following years, the incidence of polio in the United States fell from 18 cases per 100,000 people to less than 2 per 100,000 people. That is a huge success. See, when you are able to beat a virus back so far and people are getting the vaccine, it produces herd immunity because others are able to protect those who aren't able to get the vaccine or are more susceptible to diseases, whatever you may have. They act as a barrier because those with the vaccines, they're not getting the disease, they're not spreading it. But you have dumbasses out here who don't understand that rejecting vaccines puts those people's lives in fucking danger because they're dumb. You fuckers are dumb fuckers. In the 1960s, a second type of polio vaccine known as oral poliovirus vaccine or Sabin vaccine, named for its inventor, American physician and microbiologist Albert Sabin, was developed. It contains live attenuated, weakened virus and is given orally. Salk served successfully as professor of bacteriology, preventive medicine, and experimental medicine at Pittsburgh, and in 1963 became fellow and director of the Institute for Biological Studies in San Diego, California, later called the Salk Institute. Among his many honors was the Presidential Medal of Freedom awarded in 1977. So yeah, I mean, what he did has helped so many people, and then you got stupid fuckers who are like, vaccine caused autism. They're installing microchips in people. How fucking stupid can you fucking get? Anyway, let's go with final entry here. Wikipedia. As we said, born October 28, 1914, New York City, died June 23rd, 1995 in La Jolla, California. Alma mater, City College of New York, and then New York University. Had the first wife, who he married in 1939, divorced in 68, and then a second wife, whom he married in 1970, so he probably lived with until he passed. 3 children. Got a number of awards listed here. The Robert Lasker Award, Robert Koch Medal, the Mellon Institute Award, the United States Presidential Citation, Congressional Gold Medal, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So, yeah. Let's see. We went over some of the general things here. Born October 28, 1914 in New York City to Daniel and Dora Salk. He was Jewish American. His father Daniel was born in New Jersey to Jewish immigrant parents, while Dora was born in Minsk and immigrated to the United States when she was 12. His parents did not receive extensive formal education. He had 2 younger brothers, Herman and Lee, who would be a child psychologist. The family moved from East Harlem in the Bronx with some time spent in Queens. So, yeah. At age 13, he entered Townsend Harris Hall Prep School, a public school for intellectually gifted students. Ba ba ba. Let's see. He enrolled the City College of New York, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry in 1934. And often, for working class immigrant families, the City College represented the apex of public higher education. Getting in was tough, but tuition was free. But where he was so intelligent, apparently he sought higher. Competition was intense, but the rules were fairly applied. No one got an advantage based on an accident of birth. At his mother's urging, he put aside aspirations of becoming a lawyer and instead concentrated on classes necessary for admission to medical school. However, according to his biographer, the facilities at City College were barely second rate. There were no research laboratories, the library was inadequate, and the faculty contained few noted scholars. What made the place special, writes Oshinsky, was the student body that had fought so hard to get there, driven by their parents. From these ranks of the 1930s and 40s emerged a wealth of intellectual talent, including more Nobel Prize winners, 8, and PhD recipients than any other public college, except the University of California at Berkeley. So, high high praise. Let's see. Salk had actually entered the City College of New York at the age of 15, which was a common age for a freshman who had skipped multiple grades along the way. So, yeah, pretty interesting. As a child, Salk did not show any interest in medicine or science in general. He said in an interview with the Academy of Achievement, "As a child, I was not interested in science. I was merely interested in things human, the human side of nature, if you like, and I continue to be interested in that." So you could pretty much say he wasn't, you know, highly invested in, this or that. It didn't drive him. It was just he was a normal dude. He did good at his studies and grades and everything. So yeah. After graduating from the City College of New York, Salk enrolled in the New York University School of Medicine. According to Oshinsky, his biographer, New York University based its modest reputation on famous alumni such as Walter Reed, who helped conquer yellow fever. Tuition was comparatively low. Better still, it did not discriminate against Jews, while most of the surrounding medical schools, Cornell, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, and Yale, had rigid quotas in place. Yale, for example, accepted 76 applicants in 1935 out of a pool of 501. Although 200 of the applicants were Jewish, only one got in. During his years at New York University Medical School, Salk worked as a laboratory technician during the school year and as a camp counselor in the summer. Again, back in an age where you could work and go to college at the same time and it would pay for everything in itself. We don't live in that anymore. Uh, During his medical studies, he stood out from his peers, not just because of his continued academic prowess. He was Alpha Omega Alpha, the Phi Beta Kappa Society of Medical Education, but because he had decided he did not want to practice medicine. So, yeah, he does not practice medicine even though he goes into medicine. It's the behind the scenes stuff, the bacteriology, the chemistry of making the medicines to try to help people. So, yeah, became absorbed in research, even taking a year off to study biochemistry, and would eventually focus more of his studies on bacteriology, which had replaced medicine as his primary interest. Said his desire was to help humankind in general rather than single patients. It was the laboratory work in particular that gave new direction to his life. He said, "My intention was to go to medical school and then become a medical scientist. I did not intend to practice medicine, although in medical school and in my internship, I did all the things that were necessary to qualify me in that regard. I had opportunities along the way to drop the idea of medicine and go into science. At one point, at the end of my first year of medical school, I received an opportunity to spend a year in research and teaching in biochemistry, which I did. And at the end of that year, I was told that I could, if I wished, switch and get a PhD in biochemistry, but my preference was to stay with medicine. And I believe that this is all linked to my original ambition or desire, which was to be of some help to humankind, so to speak, in a large sense, than just in a one-to-one basis. Postgraduate research. He did postgraduate work in virology, doing a 2-month elective to work in the Thomas Francis Laboratory at the University of Michigan. Francis had recently joined the faculty of the medical school after working for the Rockefeller Foundation, where he discovered the type B influenza virus. And it seems to be Salk's first introduction to the world of virology. Remember, viruses and bacteria are two different things. We often think of lumping them together because both make people sick, but they are two different things. By, bacteria is where you have antibiotics. Viruses don't necessarily work the same way. They have to be treated differently. Let's see. They, Salk and Francis would eventually perfect the vaccine that would soon be widely used at army bases, where Salk discovered and isolated one of the strains of influenza that was included in the final vaccine. So yeah, a lot of their work, Army's like, yeah, we use this. I mean, as long as we can keep our men healthy, by all means. Salk would soon have his own ambitions for his own lab, and in 1947 was granted one at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, but it was smaller than he had hoped, and he found the rules imposed by the university somewhat restrictive. In 1948, Harry Weaver, the director of research at the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, contacted Salk. He asked Salk to find out if there were any types of polio other than the three then known, and offered additional space, equipment, and researchers. For the first year, he gathered supplies and researchers, including Julius Youngner, Byron Bennett, L. James Lewis, Elsie N. Ward, and Secretary Lorraine Friedman, who joined Salk's team as well. As time went on, he began securing grants from the Mellon family and was able to build a working virology laboratory. He later joined the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis Polio Project, established by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Like I said, you've got antibiotics to work with bacteria. But viruses, that's not how they work, but you could still try to make vaccines, try to help the body boost its ability to fight. And that's the whole idea on vaccines. But of course, there's stupid people out there who read this bullshit stuff and think, I know what I'm talking about. How dare you think I don't know? No, you're stupid. Extensive publicity and fear of polio led to much increased funding reaching $67 million by 1955. But despite the funding, research continued on live vaccines. Salk decided to use what he believed to be the safer killed vaccine instead of the weakened forms of strains of polio viruses, like the ones used contemporaneously by Albert Sabin, who was developing an oral vaccine. Yeah, 1957, just to show you the effects of polio. Young girl. And she's got the braces on, has to walk on crutches. Because this is what polio did to people. And yet there's stupid people who are like, yeah, let's expose our kids to polio. You're an idiot. But yeah, it talks about his testing, contributions from the March of Dimes. His inactive polio vaccine came into use in 1955, and it is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. He preferred not to have his career as a scientist affected too much by personal attention, as he had always tried to remain independent and private in his research and life. But this proved to be impossible. When you find the way to help end one of the worst scourges of mankind, it's people will be like, you are awesome. Young man, a great tragedy has befallen you. You've lost your anonymity. That was said by television personality Ed Murrow, talking to Salk shortly after the onslaught of media attention. When Ed Murrow asked him, "Who owns this patent?" Salk replied, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" I know companies and people who would try to, because they think if I can make a buck off of it, I'll fucking do it. The vaccine is calculated to be worth $7 billion had it been patented. However, lawyers from the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis did look into the possibility of a patent, but ultimately determined that the vaccine was not a patentable invention because of prior art. Salk served on the board of directors of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Author John Cohen said, Jonas Salk made scientists and journalists alike go goofy. As one of the only living scientists whose face is known in the world over, Salk, in the public's eye, had a superstar aura. Airplane pilots would announce that he's on board and passengers would burst into applause. Hotels routinely would upgrade him into the penthouse suites. A meal at a restaurant inevitably meant an interruption from an admirer. Scientists and journalists who regularly dealt with Salk would come to see him in more human terms, but many still initially approached him with the same drop-jawed wonder, as though some of the stardust might rub off. But apparently, for the most part, Salk was appalled at the demands of the public figure he had become and was resentful of what he considered to be the invasion of privacy. The New York Times would write, if Salk the scientist sounds austere, Salk the man is a person of great warmth and tremendous enthusiasm. People who greet him generally like him. A Washington newspaper correspondent commented, "He could sell me the Brooklyn Bridge and I never bought anything before." Genesis Walter Nelson Rees called him a Renaissance scientist. Brilliant, sophisticated, driven, a fantastic creature. In the years after his discovery, uh, many supporters, including the National Foundation in particular, helped him build his dream of a research complex for the investigation of biological phenomena from cell to society, and it was called the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, which opened in 1963 in San Diego neighborhood of La Jolla in a purpose-built facility designed by architect Louis Kahn. Salk believed that institution would help new and upcoming scientists along in their careers. As he said himself, "I thought how nice it would be to have a place like this existed and I was invited to work there." Beginning in the mid 80s, Salk engaged in research to develop a vaccine for AIDS. He co-founded the Immune Response Corporation with Kevin Kimberlin and invented Remune, an immunologic therapy, but was unable to secure liability insurance for the product. The project was discontinued in 2007, 12 years after Salk's death. Yeah, he would pass away in 95, so. But he tried to actually work on AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. He didn't need to, but he wanted to help. In 95, he became one of the original signatories of the Ashley Montague Resolution, which asked the World Court, now the International Court of Justice, to help end genital mutilation of children, including female genital mutilation, circumcision, and penile subincision. In 1966, the New York Times referred to him as the father of biophilosophy. According to Times journalist and author Howard Taubman, he never forgets there is a vast amount of darkness for man to penetrate. As a biologist, he believes that his science is on the frontier of tremendous new discoveries, and as a philosopher, he is convinced that humanists and artists have joined the scientists to achieve an understanding of man in all his physical, mental, and spiritual complexity. Such interchanges might lead, he would hope, to a new and important school of thinkers he would designate as biophilosophers. Salk told his cousin Joel Cassidy at a meeting of the Congressional Clearinghouse on the future of Capitol Hill in 1984 that he was optimistic that ways to prevent most human and animal diseases would eventually be developed. Not under corporate business capitalism, I'm afraid. If you can't make money on it, they don't want to do it. Salk said people must be prepared to take prudent risks, since a risk-free society would become a dead-end society without progress. Again, if there's a risk they won't make money, they'll lose money, they don't want to do it. Corporations are chicken shit, but they don't want others to make something that maybe they could make money on, or to make something that would prevent them from God Almighty making more money. So yeah, we have kind of hit dead end society because of corporate class end stage capitalism. Salk describes his biophilosophy as the application of a biological evolutionary point of view to philosophical, cultural, social, and psychological problems. He went into more details in two of his books, Man Unfolding and Survival of the Wisest. In an interview in 1980, he described his thoughts on the subject, including his feelings that a sharp rise and an unexpected leveling off in the human population would take place and eventually bring a change in human attitudes. I think of biological knowledge as providing useful analogies for understanding human nature. People think of biology in terms of such practical matters as drugs, but its contribution to knowledge about living systems and ourselves will in the future be equally important. In the past epoch, man was concerned with death, high mortality. His attitudes were anti death, anti disease, he says. In his in the future, his attitudes will be expressed in terms of profile and pro health. Of pro life and pro health. The past was dominated by death control. In the future, birth control will be more important. These changes we're observing are part of the natural order and to be expected from our capacity to adapt. It's much more important to cooperate and collaborate. We are the co authors with nature of our destiny. Talk a little bit about his personal life, his marriages. Three children: Peter, who had become a physician and part-time professor of infectious diseases at the University of Pittsburgh; Darrell, who worked with vaccines and genetics and eventually retired from the pediatrics faculty at the University of Washington School of Medicine; and Jonathan Salk, an adult and child psychiatrist and assistant clinical professor at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. Salk would die of heart failure at the age of 80 in 95 in La Jolla. And we've kind of mentioned his honors, the awards he received. And of course, they've named schools and made busts and stuff in his honor. So, yeah. Jonas Salk. Someone with whom without there would be a lot more deaths than there are. Although we're heading back down that road because of stupid. I swear, these anti vaxxers are so stupid. It does not cause autism. That one solo paper has been debunked numerous times. They do not inject microchips. you should be more worried about the companies who make big profit. Medicine, it's important. But y'all, some of y'all too stupid to fucking understand this. Anyway, we'll go ahead and end this video here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources, and it can't be a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing sources or a bunch of anecdotes slapped together to try to make a source like your aunt's friend's daughter's husband puppy had autism from the vaccine he got. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.